Miguel Durrani back here on the MMA Museum podcast, and I am joined by a true legend and a true storyteller of MMA history. I'm joined by Charlie Anzalone, who is the original jacket guy from the UFC pay-per-views. You know, you watch the early pay-per-views. He was at UFC 1, accompanying, he's from upstate New York, accompanying fighters from up there, Kevin Rozier, Hal Howard, and he was the guy that wore the red jacket with no shirt on in the pay-per-views, and he became known as that guy. But he's done so much more than. I'm so pleased to meet you, Mr. Angelo. How are you?
Great meeting you too. Good. Fantastic.
So take us back. I understand you went to the UFC. You went to the first UFC as the manager for Kevin Rozier. Rozier was a kickboxing champion. He was kind of in his 30s already, but he had his run as a fighter and stuff. What was the martial arts landscape in the 80s where Rozier was fighting and these guys? Do you remember that? I've heard you mention like Bart Vale, guys like that. Draw the landscape for us.
Well, in the 80s, kickboxing was when ESPN started, a lot of stuff in the 80s. The kickboxing fights almost rivaled the NHL in viewership back then when it was new, and they were ISK events, and the kickboxing was starting to get really big. You had the Asian rules with leg kicks, and then you had the full contact with just above the waist kicks, which is what Kevin did. Yeah, he wasn't a leg kicker, but I met him in the early 80s. He was working a door at a club I worked at, and we became good friends. He was like 18, 19 years old. He goes, I want to take karate. I want to be a kickboxer. And I said, yeah, sure, Kevin. And then I hadn't seen him for a while. And seen him a few years later. He's got like 4 or 5 titles, super heavyweight, ISKA, WKA, US, North American, world champion in full contact kickboxing, no leg kicks. The one leg kick he did, the Japanese wanted to do a promotion to pit the super heavyweight champion, full contact, against the Muay Thai, the heavyweight champion, Maurice Smith. And that didn't last too long. Once Maurice started kicking his legs, it was like he was just hopping all over the place. That was it. They ended up stopping the fight. Leg kicks wasn't his forte.
Yep. Now, how did you hear about the first UFC? What was, and you knew you had to go, right?
No, what happened was I hadn't seen Kevin in a few years. God, since the late 80s. This was what first UFC in 93, whatever. And I was DJing at a club, and I get a knock on my door. I open up the door. There's a big Kevin Rozier with a smile on his face. I hadn't seen him in years, but he wasn't the 230-pound terror. He was about 285 pounds. I go, Kevin, what are you doing? He goes, there's this new event. It's crazy. There's no rules. You can get killed. What are you out of your fucking mind? Yeah, okay. He gives me this guy's phone number. So he goes, I want you to manage me. Help me out. Okay. I called the guy. The guy's name was Art Davey. And he goes, I'm Art Davey. I got a new event similar to the Valley Kudos. It's called Company's Wow Promotions. It was originally going to be called Wow War of the Worlds, and they changed it to the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And he goes, I'm looking for fighters for an 8-man tournament. No rules, no hold bar. But the only thing you can't do is eye gouge and fight. It's like, okay. So I started giving him, he goes, what fight are you guys? I got a 5-time world super heavyweight kickboxing, Kevin Rozier, blah, blah, blah. I didn't finish my sales pitch, and he goes, I'll take him. Because everybody was turning it down. Like you said, Bart Vale, Benny Urquidez, Don Dragon, you name it, they all turned it down. So that's how we got into UFC 1. And,
so no, Kevin gets the UFC 1. You're with him from the beginning. You spend the week in Denver.
Oh yeah, I was his manager. We went with him, and his wife was
Talk
there.
about your first impression of what you saw there, because there's a legendary story that Sean Wheelock, who's Art Davey's co-author, tells about the rule meeting and stuff. What was your take on all that? Because that's the first ever rule meeting. What was going on there? I mean, it got heated.
Oh, in that book too, by the way, most of the photos in there are mine.
I bet.
You'll see the photographs. And it was kind of weird. Bill Wallace was there, and Kathy, what's her name?
Brothers.
Yeah. And Jim Brown was there. They brought him in as a little celebrity, famous football player, and they're going over the rules. And Zane Frazier they're going, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, the only thing you couldn't do is I got him fights. Zane Frazier stood up and said, what happens if your mouthpiece falls out? And Jorge Gracie goes, tough, protect your teeth. That was the best part of the meeting. Yeah, there ain't no stopping. Beat a mouthpiece out, put it in like boxing,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, okay, here we go.
So how did you and Kevin look at the rest of the competition? You got, Gracie there, who's obviously, skinny and the youngest opponent, the youngest guy there. Everybody else is grown men and a lot of testosterone there. The Hawaiian guy was huge. Gordeau is a mean man. Zane is crazy. Tell me your impression of everybody.
I said, Kevin, there's Patrick Smith, there's Gerard Gordeau. I said, these guys leg kick. And you don't like leg kicks. So you're going to have to, try to grab them and throw them or do something, I said, the other guys are submission fighters. Got Ken Shamrock. Of course, you got this 180-pound Royce Gracie, which promoters knew was going to win the whole thing because, it was almost like a Gracie infomercial. They put fighters in the UFC that they knew were going to win the thing. And hopefully they would match them so the ones that they wanted, Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie, would be there at the end. Which he wasn't. And it just, just go in there, no rules, do what you got to do. And he fought Zane Frazier, which was an epic fight. Kevin, classic. Kevin's holding on the top of the cage and standing on it, stomping on his head after he punched him down. And that was that's a highlight film. There's no other highlight film like that.
Yeah, for sure. I remember, the towel coming in, and Kevin being very happy.
Yeah.
So how did that feel? Now you go back into the locker room. Were you sharing a locker room with somebody? What was the scene like behind this? Because you got to come out and fight probably 20 minutes later.
Well, we didn't think we were going to fight 20 minutes later because we figured these fights would go longer, And we're in a dressing room. Kevin was pounding Zane Frazier. We got his hands in a bucket of ice. And Kevin he's winded. He weighed 285 pounds. He was in no shape.
Talking about, so Kevin beat Zane Frazier in,
right.
You mentioned an epic fight. Now you're back in the locker room. He was icing his hands. It's about 20 minutes. And you come out and meet Gerard Gordeau. What were your experiences with Gordeau? How did you guys size up Gordeau before the fight? Because he's another little guy, kind of, compared to Kevin anyway.
Yeah, but he was a tall guy. He had long legs, long arms. He was about 6'4", 5". Right? He was a big guy. And it wasn't 20 minutes. It was about 15 minutes at the most. Well, you guys are up. We just sat down. I go, shit, Kevin, I thought we were going to have a break, but these fights weren't going, 5-10 minutes. They were going like a couple of minutes, and then we had to go back in. And I go, Kevin, this guy is a vicious leg kicker from Holland. It's like try to get in there and get close to him. But of course, he started leg kicking Kevin, and Kevin don't like leg kicks. Man, he was hopping around. Boom, he finally went down from the leg kick, and Gerard goes down, starts punching him out. And Kevin's wife's at ringside. Stop the fight. They're killing my husband. I said, I got to tie it through the towel, and Kevin wasn't going to get up from that.
Yeah. No, Gordeau obviously, in the finals lost to Gracie, but came back in MMA many times. It was a real, that was suited to his game. He was a mean man.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, he fought in Japan a lot. I went to Japan with him. uh, once doing an event
Well, that
there. I think it was he had a guy fighting in I think it was shoot the Shudo double cross, it might have been. That was a Caesar shoot boxing show where they combined Shudo with kickboxing.
yeah.
And oh, that was a great show. God, who was on that show? Ramon Dicker had a battle with a guy. The little tranny Thai boxer, she was on it. Manson Gibson couldn't make that fight because we were at the airport and making the connection to Tokyo, and I see his manager, and I said, "Where's Manson?" Well, they flagged Manson's passport because he owed child support, and they wouldn't let him leave the country.
Yep, that
Yeah,
bites people a bunch of times. So let's go. So you became very prolific in early MMA, making connections everywhere. All that comes from attending UFC one. That's how it all started for you.
yeah. And what happened was Art Davie and me hit it off real well. We're best of friends to this day. What happened was fighters would call Mr. Dave, Art Davie. Mr. Davie, I want to test myself in the UFC. I'm a kung fu, but these guys are probably in the woods sniffing incense, doing their karate moves and all kinds of. And he was like, "Well, I don't deal with fighters. I only deal with managers." And they go, Mr. Davie, I don't have a manager. And I would tell him, "Well, I got a manager for you." And he gave every kung fu kook my phone number. People would be calling me wanting to get into the UFC. And yeah, it was I became friends with Gary Goodrich. I brought him back to the UFC. As he wanted a manager, he didn't want to have to deal with the promoters and stuff. And
Sure, sure. Let me ask
well,
you. So, did you go right to UFC two? Did you attend UFC two as well?
oh yeah, yeah. I went to them all up until oh God, 14, 15, whatever. I didn't go to the David and Goliath tournament. Well, I had Harold Howard, UFC 3. I had Joel Sutton, I think, in UFC 5 as an alternate. That's an Oleg and Tank Abbott fought. Um, I had Joel Sutton again at the UFC. I'm looking at the poster right now, UFC 7 in Buffalo. I had a couple guys on the undercard at the UFC in Biloxi, Mississippi, at Casino Magic that I co-promoted with Les Banano. We got 5% of the I got 5% of the gate. We got it approved there with their boxing commissioner. And then we got it approved. I had Nick Sanzo in the UFC. That got we got thrown out of Niagara Falls in the middle of the night. And we had to go to Dothan, Alabama. That
Well,
was a
let's get
trip.
to that. That was that, but that's a little bit later UFC. Let's go back. So what? UFC two gets announced. It sounds like did you have a guy at UFC two, or you had to go anyway? It
Yeah,
was like
oh yeah, yeah.
everybody had to go.
Sean Doherty. He was 18 years old. He was the youngest guy to be in the UFC. And I also helped Orlando Veet get in that UFC. And that was a 16-man tournament
Yep,
that they
yep.
only did once. And then UFC, Harold Howard, UFC, Ford, God, I don't know. I had so many. Couple alternate fights. In the UFC that I brought Chuck Liddell to fight Noe Hernandez. I'll tell you a story about Chuck Liddell. Uh, uh, I was looking for a guy as an alternate for the undercard, and one of my best friends here in Las Vegas, one kicked Nick Blomgren. I go, Nick, you got a guy who can kick and wrestle or what? I just need a guy for an undercard, just for an alternate. And he goes, well, a friend of ours, he's a amateur kickboxer. His name's Chuck Liddell, but he wrestled 1 year at Cal Poly. I said, well, that's good enough. That's how we got him into the UFC against Noe Hernandez. And what happened on the way out, a good friend of mine, promoter Sergio Bottarelli from Brazil, he was a great kickboxer in his day. And he was a promoter. He goes, Charlie, your guy's tough. I want him to come to Brazil to fight Pele. So what are you out of your mind? Pele Landy's a fucking legend. And I said, how much does Pele weigh? He weighs about 175 pounds. So I said, let me talk to Chuck. I said, Chuck, you want to fight Pele? He goes, I'm like, he never fought. He was just an alternate in his MMA fight. So I said, Sergio, I said, Chuck will weigh 200, 205. And he said, okay. So I go, how much you're gonna pay? This is in like 1998 or whatever, 5,000 US cash, no tax. A lot of money back then, especially if you got paid in Brazil, But yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, I
So they
remember that fight because Bottarelli
oh,
ran the IBC with sponsors, like high-end sponsors. So you're like in a very, very upper crusty hotel, and like you could almost touch the roof from the ring, It's a very strange
oh,
video to see.
and that was a brutal fight.
For
And
sure.
I sent one kick Nick down there with him, and that was one of the best fights you'll ever see. Bare knuckle, no time limit, or was a 30-minute time limit. And I put Chuck on the map. And then I booked him against Jeremy Horn. And then I got in a disagreement with John Peretti, the guy who almost killed mixed martial arts. He's the reason why it got banned in fucking New York.
Right.
And what happened was uh he told Chuck, I said, he told Chuck Liddell, if you're dealing with Charlie Anzalone, you can't be in the UFC. In the meantime, I had a deal for Chuck for K1 if he wanted it. I said, Chuck, you can wait 2-5 to 210 fighting K1 because he was a good Kempo kickboxer. You never saw a lot of his kickboxing skills in the UFC because he got spoiled knocking people out that they gave him the knockout. And so because I just want to keep doing the UFC. I said, okay, go ahead. So in the meantime, I put Dewey Cooper into the UFC instead. And yeah, and then Gary Goodrich goes, I don't want to deal with managers anymore. I said, okay. So I brought him back to the UFC, and then I got him. I did his Pride deal. It was a 4-fight deal, and one of those fights was in his first fight in K1, and that's when Mr. Ishii fought. I think he fought Musashi. Mr. Ishii just fell in love with him. He goes, "Oh, I must have the big arm wrestler in K1," and that's how Gary got into K1. And yeah,
Let me take you back a step
but,
because I know that you're a networker, and in the early UFCs, you're already talking about making friends and stuff. I want to ask your impression on some of the characters from the early days. Like, how about Andy Anderson? Because he's another guy that kind of became friends with Art and Bob and everybody. What was the deal with Andy? Because I know he's doing time right now, but I'd like to interview him.
my buddy, we're such good friends. God, I miss him. He was a character. Uh, he had a lot of money. He had strip clubs that his sort of mother really owned in Dallas, and then he got in trouble with that stuff, laundering money for some like gang or drug dealers or whatever. And in a way, he sort of got screwed out of that deal, from what I hear. And I didn't know about that. I was hanging out with Robin Leach one night. Robin and Andy were best of friends, and I go, Robin, have you heard from Andy lately? He goes, Chuck, we won't see Andy for a while. He got 360 months, like 30 fuck. Are you kidding me? And that's how I found out. I said, I wonder why I wasn't hearing from Andy. Robin Leach told me. But he was a character and he was fun loving. I met him he got involved with the UFC site promoter Buddy Albin. That's where he knew him from. He knew Buddy and Andy and Anthony Macias. And yeah, that was the Dallas crew, and but Andy was a fun loving guy. I just loved hanging out with him.
Yeah, I have a funny story about him because obviously he's a guy who was wealthy, especially for the time. He threw his money. He was a character, and he knew how to play. And it was a UFC. It was like 19 when Boss Rutan fought and won the title. We were in New Orleans, and we were out partying afterwards. And I knew who he was because I'd seen him fight John Hess, but I didn't know that he had money. So I went to pay the tab, and I'm not a money guy, but I went to pay the tab. There was like 6 of us at the table, and he got so offended.
Yeah, I co-promoted that fight at the Pontchartrain Center.
Yeah, yeah. And that was
Yeah.
a great fight. That was, the original New Orleans shows were all very historic. You had Militich and Newton, you had Coleman and Rizzo, you had unbelievable fights down there. And I know that at that point,
And the Pontchartrain Center, that's when John Peretti was a matchmaker at the time. And
yeah,
he became a matchmaker after Art Davies sold out. And he goes, Igor Zanovi is going to destroy Frank Shamrock. He's going to make history. And 15 seconds later, he was knocked out with a broken collarbone.
yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and that's when me and Les Badano, Les was a big boxing promoter down there in the Gulf Coast, and he had all the commissioners down there, so we brought them to the UFC. It's the reason why UFC got proved there, and with Larry Berger and T-Land Miller, and they liked the UFC so much they go, y'all got a home down here in New Orleans if you want it, and then we brought the Casino Magic with Billy Lyons. Billy Lyons, he goes, he's a real redneck. I've been in boxing since 1939. You can't tell me nothing about the fighting sports. He goes, but I'll tell you that I'm going to prove this. I think this is safer than boxing.
Wow.
They ain't got the power of a boxer, which was true. And with their hands anyway. But he said, now people are here to see a fight. So I'm going to have a whistle. Now I'm going to be at ringside with a whistle. And if these guys are laying on the ground for more than 2 minutes, I'm going to blow my whistle and the referee going to stand them up.
Okay.
And luckily, he didn't have to stand them up. Either the referee stood them up or they got up or whatever like that. Said, oh, no, here we go. Please don't blow the whistle. And I'm at ringside. Don't blow the whistle. Don't blow the whistle. Don't blow the whistle.
Now, you mentioned a name in there that is another one of those legendary names. You mentioned Buddy Albin. Now, maybe you can clear this up because you were there. So, Buddy Albin apparently was Oleg's manager at one point, and also Macias, and they had one of those.
Oh yeah, in Casper, Wyoming.
And they had one of those second matches that Oleg, kind of benefited from, went in fresher against Tank. What can you tell us about that? Because Macias, I respect Macias. Macias was a dog. He would fight under a bridge,
Oh,
but
yeah. My buddy. What would happen was Joe Sutton won his alternate match. And but he was pounding on the guy's head and his hand was swollen. So they had a thing there to do x-rays. And I go, Art, his hand's not broken, but look at it. It looks like a fucking club. So he had to pull out. He would have gone in to fight Tank Abbott. And so he had to pull out. So Anthony, I think, was the other alternate, I think. And so his job was to fight Oleg. But the album goes, well, you know what to do. And he did it, And yeah. Oh yeah, Casper. That's when Tank's crew and the Huntington Beach Bad Boys, Paul Herrera and them waited in the lobby of the hotel, and Patrick Smith came out of the elevator and they beat the shit out of him in the hotel lobby.
And that's because he pulled out of the fight, and they didn't like that. That was that story, right?
Yeah, it was something like that. But they just didn't like him. It's like, because he showed up, but he didn't want to fight, but he showed up anyway.
Now let me ask you. So you're at the first UFC. You drink everything in, and now every time you go to a UFC, you're meeting like the new characters. What was your first impression of Tank? Because Tank backed it up. He was a loose cannon. Like, he was a wild dude.
Let me tell you, Tank was, when I first met Tank, He would always try to intimidate you. Here I am. I'm a little guy, you know. But I became very good friends with Paul. I became very good friends with Paul Herrera. And Paul Herrera came up to me, I think it was UFC 3-2. And he goes, anybody fucks with you, they're gonna have to fuck with me. So good, I got a bad boy as a as a new pal now, you know. And I used to wear this black beret, my hat. I remember Tank. We were in New Orleans, and he goes, "I want your fucking hat." I said, "Oh, you're not gonna have my fucking hat." I wouldn't give him my hat. I said, get away! Leave my hat alone. And that's when we went down to Bourbon Street and had a really good time. Me and Joe Gold from Full Contact Fighter, uh, Eddie, what's his name, the reporter,
Eddie Goldman.
Eddie Goldman. Oh, we had a ball. Eddie Goldman, me, and Shamrock Tank. We all went down to Bourbon Street, and with David Isaacs from the UFC, and that was a hell of a night. Luckily, Tank didn't get in any fights. But yeah,
For sure.
he he was an intimidating guy.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, we talked about Andy Anderson briefly, but what did you think of his fight? Because the guy he fought, John Hess,
Oh, he's
Vitor
poking his
Belfort,
eye gouging him. He
yeah,
was
and
sticking his
Vitor
fingers.
Belfort later humiliated him, and
Yeah.
he never fought again. But when he was in the UFC, that guy was about as nutty and crazy as anybody I've ever heard of. What was your impression of him?
Of who has?
Yeah, John, because
Yeah. Yeah.
the eye
I was
gouging,
like,
the bone breaking, and then the attitude.
yeah, I was like, who's this guy? I never heard of him anymore. I don't know where Art Davie found him. But yeah, I thought it was kind of a jackass myself.
Yeah, yeah. And Andy, Andy kind of got a raw deal there, because hey, he got eye gouge
There's
and
no fighting, no eye gouging. They should have disqualified him right there, and they didn't.
yeah, yeah, that for sure. That was one of the wild things. So now talk about UFC 3. Now this is the debut of Harold Howard. And
Mhm.
Howard is one of those guys that everybody remembers fondly, like a real character. The if you're coming on, come on. The whole all
That
that.
Tito Ortiz told me every time I'd see him, he'd look at me and go, "If you're coming on, come on." He goes, "That was the best line I ever heard of a UFC fighter." Well, I met him, a friend of mine, Bill Gallant, and at a karate school, a very big martial arts school, did big tournaments back in Buffalo. I said, you know anybody that's like in grapple or jujitsu or something, and not just karate? Or yeah, I got a guy, Harold Howard. He was a Canadian jujitsu champion, and he was a Canadian full or karate champion. You know, he fought in the days of back then with Nasty Anderson, Billy Blanks, all those kind of full contact guys, and he did a lot of movies. He did Gladiator Cop with Lorenzo Lamas. He did. I think he fought Billy Blanks in the movie TC 2000, and it did a lot of movie stuff. So I go, okay. So I went up and met him. I said, man, this guy's big. He looks he's got the look that I want.
Yeah.
So Art Davie, um, loved him. We put him in the event. That was down in Charlotte, and yeah, that was epic. What happened that night? That's when I had the red. That's when I debuted the red tuxedo jacket.
Yep.
With no t-shirt on. So I remember the boxing promoter, Butch Lewis, he used to wear the black tux with the bow tie around his neck and no shirt. And I said, "Oh, I gotta do something stupid now. Now I gotta get some exposure here." So that's what I did. And I'd be taunting the crowd and everything. They'd be booing. People be throwing stuff at me. But anyway, after he knocked out Roland Payne, we're walking back to the dressing room. And as where the fighters came out, there were these big colored can lights that would be going up and down with the smoke machines as we came into the octagon. Now on the way back, they still had the smoke machine going, and we're walking back to the dressing room, and all of a sudden, bang! Harold Howard's on the ground. What the fuck happened? I thought somebody threw a bottle at him or something. He walked into one of those big lights that were going up and down because all the smoke machine was still on. And the line director sitting in a chair there with his headphone on, just took his headphones off, went, "Oh my God, I can't believe what happened." And so we went back in the dressing room. After Harold sort of came to, and they said, "Harold, you want to be, we can replace you. We don't want to use an alternate." He goes, 50,000 to win? No way. Eh? He goes, "I'm going to fight. I'm good to fight. I'm good to fight." So when you see him coming out now for the next fight, well, what happened was he was supposed to fight was it Ken Shamrock? Yeah. And he pulled out because Ken Shamrock didn't want to fight unless he could fight Hoist Gracie.
Right.
So he pulled out after he fought Felix Mitchell. And so, okay, let's go in. And, well, Ken's out. We need to put one of the alternates in. Steve Jenham, who hadn't fought all night, fresh as a daisy. And his team didn't like me. I was saying, this guy hasn't fought all night long, and he's gonna fight for $50,000, for in the final now, and they didn't like me. Yeah, this is martial arts. This is honor. You're like a sleazy boxing promoter. I said, oh boy, now I'm getting a reputation. I love that. I got to take this to the limit. And so when you see Harold walking out, he's got a towel wrapped around his neck, and he's got he's holding his neck like this. You see him coming out. He had a stiff neck from whacking his head in that can. So you can see him coming out without holding his neck coming out to the cage. And he did tried his little karate move, his flip thing, and and then Steve Jenham got him on the. Yeah, he took Steve Jenham down, and Jenham flipped him over, I think, or whatever it was. And that was the end of that. But he made $15,000 US, which was like about $20,000 Canadian back then.
For sure.
And
And that's good. Let me ask you a question. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Harold Howard versus Kevin Rozier. What happens?
I think Harold Howard beats him because he was tall. He could kick, a good martial artist, and he could punch too. He had those long arms. I think he'd probably whack Kevin. Because at that time, Kevin was 285 pounds. When Kevin was a 230-pound kickboxing champion, that's a different story.
Okay, and that's fair because I remember Kevin, and I gotta be honest with you. I look at UFC guys as a lot of the early guys were in their 30s. You know what I mean? It's like they'd already done their stuff. Kevin came in burnt. Kevin was sloppy by the time he got to UFC.
Oh yeah, he hadn't fought, and he was in no shape to fight. But hey, he had the balls enough to do it when he heard about this event.
Hey, that's for full credit and rest in peace, Kevin. Rest in peace.
Oh yeah, he had his demons. I loved him. I miss him.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: were you involved? I think he's from upstate New York, also. Another kickboxer named Robert Lucarelli.
Oh, Lucarelli was he's from Albany area. He fought Orlando Veit in UFC too.
Right.
That's what Orlando Veit sort of pounded the crap out of him. Lucarelli was a good guy, really nice guy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's funny, those circles there. Lucarelli's another guy that I feel like was the generation before. Like he came into this like older and just out of shape. You know what I mean?
I was in Orlando Veit's corner that night. I was with Master Toddy because he had been training with Master Toddy for the UFC. His Muay Thai training in Las Vegas. Yeah, so you'll see us walking out. It was me, Kelly Gallant, and God rest her soul. And I think she came out with it, but I was with Master Toddy and in the corner.
And Orlando was,
No, it was Valerie Hennon, Orlando's future wife.
Yeah, I was gonna say his wife also fought, and full credit to Art Davie, because I know before UFC 1, Art Davie called Ernesto Hoost to ask him to be in there, and that's how he got to Gerard.
He called them all.
Yeah, he wanted the best, and Orlando Veit was a little guy, but at that point it didn't matter. He came in, the Lucarelli fight, he caught him, and there were weird sequences in there because nobody knew what they were doing. And then he ran into Remco Pardo. What was your feeling on UFC 2? Because being there live must have been intense. Like, how many ambulances got used? Like, what were the medical situations in the back? Because you had Morris getting killed, you had Orlando V getting flattened, elbow after elbow, the night of elbows.
Elbows and the knees. Robert Lucarelli. Oh God, he was a bloody mess. And you know what's funny? The 16-man tournament, right? They put the main guys, the more well-known fighters, in the nice hotel, and the rest of us, who were Sean Doherty and some other people. Sean was 18 years old. He was the youngest guy to do mixed martial arts at the time. And they put us in a hotel, which was like a welfare hotel just down the street from the arena. I mean, it had velvet paintings on the wall of Mexican girls and all kinds of stuff, and lions and tigers. And oh God, I was looking for bed bugs. And but yeah, that was a long night. Gerard Gordeau came with Fred Comacher. There was just a whole bunch of us. And I remember, was it UFC 1 or 2? We went to, it was maybe it was 2, because Gold's Gym sponsored the first couple. So we all went to dinner at a renovated train station. It was a real nice restaurant in downtown Denver. And I was with Pete Gramkowski, who was one of the CEOs of Gold's Gym. And we're walking down. Pete Gramkowski, he was a great guy. He was one of the first guys that got thrown out of the Mr. Universe competition for steroids or something like that. He's the one who brought Gold's Gym to the world. And what happened was, we're walking by, we see this bum sitting on the wall. And he goes, Charlie, wait a minute, try. So we go over this bum sitting on the wall. And Pete Gramkowski is a really intimidating looking fucking guy. And a nice guy, but when you look at him, you go, man, this guy's scary looking. He gives like homeless guy $100 bill. And he goes, if I see you drinking booze when I walk back, I'm gonna beat the fucking shit out of you. I want you to get some food. Oh, sir, God bless you. Oh, thank you. No, I won't do that. And we walked back. And as we were walking back after dinner, it's in the snow. We walked by, and there's the homeless guy with a sandwich. He didn't have a bottle of booze on him.
That's all.
Yeah, Gold's Gym, man. They were, but because of the bad publicity, they decided not to sponsor the UFC anymore.
Yep,
Yep.
for sure. Now let me ask you this question. In here, you got real tight with some people, because how did you meet Federico Lapenda? Because I know that you went and you were like the commentator for like some of his early World Valley Tudo shows.
Yeah, I re-announced the show for him in Japan. That's when I brought Harold Howard. He fought Hugo Duarte. That was an 8-man tournament. Richard Red Herd. He's a cool guy.
Oh God,
He was over.
I interviewed Red Herd, and he's a police officer. He was over in Ukraine too. He's like a real like a guy that could fight now in a ditch in a German war. You know what I mean? It's like he's the guy you want on your side.
He was a paid trainer over in the Ukraine.
Yeah, no, that Richard Herd is
what a great guy. I did 2 shows. We filmed 2 Valley Tudo shows that day. It was about 90 fucking degrees in Tokyo. We're on the bus going to the arena. I got a suit coat on. I got my suit, my shirt on. Because Charlie went to the ring announced. Okay. And that was I was sweating bullets re-announcing these 2 shows. I didn't bring a change of shirt or anything. And me and Federico became good friends in Buffalo at the UFC. Of course, my hometown. And then after we became friends, when he had what's his name? The King of the Streets.
Oh,
who won? Marco Huas. Yeah. I'm looking at the poster right now. As a matter of fact, it's right up on the wall there. And we became good friends. And we went to the Ukraine together. And see, Federico saw me. I was a nightclub DJ, and he saw me doing some contests, announcing some stuff at a nightclub I worked at in Buffalo during the UFC there. And he goes, "I want you to announce one of my shows. You look so handsome as an announcer." I said, "Okay, that's how I started." And what happened was, even before that, I used to have book fighters in Shudo.
Okay.
Or after that, I'm sorry. So when Sakamoto saw me ring announcing Federico shows, Shudo said, he goes, "I want you to be a guest ring announcer for the Shudo Valley Tudo at the Bay NK Hall." And I did those twice because they did them once every year. And I would announce the fighters as they came to the ring, and then Daiki, the ring announcer, would announce them in the ring. And then I got involved with Federico when he Buddy Alvin, the very first IFC in Kiev in the Ukraine.
Right.
That could have been a made for a movie espionage thing. It was backed by some Ukraine guys.
Yeah.
Andy Anderson came. We had a cast of characters.
Paul Varlin was there. I had the good fortune to interview Paul Varlins, his last interview in public before he passed away, and he talks
Did he
about
tell
that
you?
show.
Did he tell you what happened at the casino that night?
Him and Boss Rutan were wrestling, and he went through a window. That's the story
went
I
through
got.
a stained glass door, and
Wow.
and of course the Russian or Ukrainian mob guys, they loved us, and they told the bouncers wanted to throw him out. Said, no, they can do anything he wants. He can do anything he wants. Boss Rutan goes up and gives the guy a kiss on the cheek.
Yeah.
Because he was groping some of the strippers in the club. That what it was. They had a restaurant and nightclub on the first floor, a strip club on the second floor, and a third floor was the casino. And Howard Peschler produced the show. And I ring announce. They said, well, I wasn't supposed to ring announce. They needed a ring announcer. I had a fighter that was supposed to go. I forgot who it was, and he couldn't go. And maybe it was Joel Sutton. Somebody they didn't have a passport. So what happened was they go, "We need an announcer." I said, "Well, I don't have any announcing clothes. I got sweatpants and shit. I'm in the Ukraine. It's wintertime. It's March." So Buddy Albin gave me his suit coat, and Ron Van Cleef gave me his tie. And that's what I wore to ring announce the very first IFC. And
That's awesome.
And there were no headphones or earpiece for me to use. So the guy at the corner at the ringside who was announcing the show, I think I don't know who else it was, maybe Joe Maffey or somebody. They were doing the commentating for the show, and I had to read their lips, and I could look up and I can hear him say, "And back to the ring with our announcer Charlie Anzalone." And then I would announce the show. So I had to do it by reading lips to know my cue. And
awesome.
at the end of the night, we were back at the hotel, and Buddy Albin was in an office with these Ukrainian guys. They wanted to know where all the fucking money was for the show. The place was sold out, this arena, loud as hell, because Igor Vachenchin won his first ever mixed martial arts show event.
Yeah.
And the way I could see it is the guys who were at the door at the arena were probably pocketing the fucking money. So Buddy Albin goes, where's I don't know where the money is. Your event, your arena here. Who's taking in the money? So yeah, we didn't think. And Federico Lapenda goes to me. He goes, Charlie, this place is giving me the creeps. I want to go home. You know, man,
Funny. You know,
Leon's.
'cause-
Buddy Albin brought Leon Spinks to the show with us.
wow.
And what he did, Buddy would sort of do some shady things. He said he was going to have Muhammad. He put Muhammad Ali's picture on the fucking poster for the first IFC, and he sort of painted a logo copying the UFC's logo in the center of the ring, and the UFC got word of it, and they had to get some paint and paint over the logo and hope it dried by fight time. So anyway, I got along good with all those Ukrainians. Whenever we went somewhere, they would take me by myself. They're, Charlie, you come with us. You come with us. Everybody else to go in the van. I rode in the Cadillac with the Ukrainian guys. And but they probably stole it Brighton Beach in New York and shipped it over to Kiev.
Still
Yeah,
good to
that
be
was
taken
and what happened was everybody had got there, and my flight to JFK, I flew from Buffalo to JFK, and the flight was delayed going to Paris for my connection to Kiev. And so we had to spend the night in Paris. I never made it to Ukraine when everybody else did. So I finally get the flight to the Ukraine the next day. I'm going through customs, and guy looks at me in his military uniform, gets my passport. He goes, fight. Fight, fight, the martial arts fight. Yeah. Okay. Stamp my passport. They were waiting for me. So I go through the passport check, and I got my bag, and I'm going to customs where they look through your bag. And there are these two guys, young guys in black jackets, leather jackets with a sign that said Anzalone. I thought Buddy Albin and them were gonna pick me up at the airport. And I got two of the little gangsters picking me up. I go, I said, that's me. I'm waving that's me. They walk up to the guy at the baggage check, the customs, say something to him. Grabs my bag, runs through customs with me. You know, they probably said, give Anzalone his bag or we'll kill you.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
we get in the car. We get in the car. We're not 10 feet from the curb. We hear beep, 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 lights flashing. They turn around, look at me, Charlie, polizi. And they start laughing. I go, fuck a polizi. I haven't been in Kiev for 5 minutes and the polizi's pulling us over. They looked in the truck, they let us go. It was about a half an hour drive into the city from the airport. And that was, and of course, they wanted to treat us real nice and all that. And it was like, we have girlfriends for you. Pick whatever girlfriend you want. We had a girlfriend for the whole 5 days. We had our own girlfriend. And Leon Spinks, they brought Leon Spinks to the event and not Muhammad Ali. Of course, Buddy Elvis said, well, Muhammad Ali couldn't make it, so we brought Leon Spinks. Yeah. And the guy Leon fought him out in the Olympics took him out to dinner.
Oh,
and he'd be drinking all the Leon be knocking on my door. Bam, Charlie, where the cocktail at? I said, Leon, you drank all the fucking you drank all the Hennessy in the hotel. There isn't anymore. Oh God.
Let me ask you a question though. Let's get back to Lependa because and thank you very much for those stories because that Ukraine trip, that IFC is definitely legendary. But Lependa did a lot of stuff like that. Like Lependa did a show in Israel. You know what I mean? It's like in Japan. How did he pull it off? He was way ahead of his time.
He networked. He networked with the fight in Japan. That he did his Valley Tudos in Brazil. He did, he brought the Smashing Machine, Mark Kerr, brought Igor Vachensin down to Brazil. People started seeing videos of all his events. Who's this Federico Lependa guy? And he took the ball and ran with it. And he did an event in Jamaica back in the late 90s, or early mid 90s. Yeah, late 90s. I was living in Las Vegas at the time. He did a show in Jamaica for some Russian bankers or whatever you want to call them. And he did a Valley Tudo for this Russian guy, took over the Runaway Bay Hotel Resort in Jamaica, or the resort in Runaway Bay, for a birthday party for him and 30 of his friends. And I said, that's nice. These guys run the whole hotel. We get to the hotel, and we're going to do a mixed martial arts show on the beach for these guys. They set up a ring on the beach. Todd Hester was there from his magazine, and what happened was we see the swimming pool's full of bubble bath, and then we see about 50, 60 little naked girls running around. And it's like, holy shit, what are they doing? They got these girls and flew them from all over the world in private jets to Jamaica for the party. So these girls come up to me and they, Charlie, you're the ring announcer? I said, yeah, well, we're from Miami, blah, 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 blah. And they're scantily clothes with nothing on. And they go, you want to see where we're going to have a concert for the birthday party? Yeah, okay. They walked me over to holding my hands, we were walking over to the golf course next to the hotel, and there's a stage that you would see at Meadowlands. Big concert stage. And I see a drum kit up on the stage. It says Kiss. So, oh, you got a Kiss impersonator? No, Kiss, Sugar Ray, and the Scorpions are playing for the birthday party. You got to be shitting me. Thought they were bullshitting me. So we're having lunch, and here comes fucking Gene Simmons. I got that picture. Gene Simmons comes walking in. He took a nice picture with, holy shit, took a picture with me. And I go, they are gonna do a concert for, must have cost them a fortune. Gene Simmons later told me, I ran into him in Las Vegas. He moved here. He goes, that was the strangest show I ever did. And I showed him the picture of us. He was having dinner at a restaurant here last year when he was living here with his wife. And he goes, that was a wild show, wasn't it? And we're alive to talk about it, aren't we? I say, yeah. Federico gave me the money to pay the fighters in cash. I had an envelope with thousands of dollars in cash. I'm holding out like this, walking around the resort at night and stuff. And Rico, where are we gonna go with this fucking money? You got to pay the fighter. Just meet me over in the office. I said, you better have somebody with me, you know. But yeah, that was a great. We did an MMA show on the beach. He brought Brazilian fighters there. He brought Brazilian fans there. He brought Oleg Tatarov was there. I had him do an intro in the ring, explaining the rules of Valley Tudo, you know, in Russian. And yeah, that was and I was also the timekeeper because they had no timekeeper. I said, Rico, how you doing the show? You know what the time clock I used? My friggin' wristwatch. I counted, okay, Todd Hester had the bell. I said, okay, ring the bell now. Bong, ring the bell. And I was looking for 3 minutes on my 5 minutes, whatever it was on my watch. Yeah. No, but that was a wild that was a wild show.
Now you mentioned, you know, Lependa gave you access to, you managed some Brazilian fighters like Francisco Bueno, who, you know, to me is a legend.
I met Francisco Bueno through him and some other people, and I met Bueno through him and through Marco Albuquerque, and I had him in the first Abu Dhabi Combat Club, and he armbarred Nakaldi, the Russian guy who'd never been beaten, the Russian wrestler. And then Guy Niven's called me, goes, Charlie, Bueno's sick. What do you mean? He's throwing up green and everything. He caught some kind of bug. And he goes, he's all dehydrated. He can't fight. And who was he going to fight in the final? Rico Rodriguez. Francisco would have mopped the floor with him. And Rico Rodriguez won the $50,000 at the first Abu Dhabi Combat Club. So then I booked Francisco Bueno into the UFC the same night I had Chuck Liddell in the UFC. He was supposed to fight Mark Van Arsdale, and he pulled his hamstring fucking running. Wow. And he ended up coming to the UFC because they replaced him, but he had his plane ticket paid for. So yeah, that would have been his first UFC, Francisco. But he was a tough guy. You know, he was a better judo guy, Maida judo, than he was Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
You
You know,
know,
he was state
jujitsu
champion.
in jujitsu, you know, people look at the American top team's instructor, Ricardo Laborio. He's not there anymore, but
Right.
they're
Yeah.
they, Francisco fought him to a stalemate practically in the world championship. You know,
Yeah,
Francisco
yeah,
is the real deal.
he is the real deal. Yeah, he works at he's doing part. Well, you know, he's old Brazil money. His family's old Rio money. They're very wealthy. He's a very wealthy. Francisco's a very wealthy real estate developer,
Good for
and
him.
I mean, he's got fuck you money. You know, he comes here, he's renting a nice house here. I want to bring his kid, raise his kids here, and in America, go to good schools. He went and bought a brand new Corvette cash, bought a brand new Wagoneer cash. Yeah, he's got millions of dollars worth of real estate. Became a very savvy investor. I think his parents were into real estate at one time. But yeah, Ricardo Laborio, what a good guy. Super
Yeah,
fantastic guy.
yeah, for sure.
And
Now, go ahead.
yeah, but and then Marco Albuquerque, he says, "Oh, how come you're not getting Francisco fights?" I said, "Well, there's only so many fights out there." So then they started working with Francisco. Francisco started working with him. They knew each other from Rio and Sergio Bartarelli. They book him into the. I had Gary Goodrich against oh, what the fuck's his name? The wrestler. Anyway, in the Valley Tudo, and in Japan. I'm sorry, it was Pride. In Pride. Tom Erickson, Gary Goodrich fought in that fight.
Oh yeah,
And who do they put Francisco Bueno up against? Igor Vichencha. And he was working out in a boxing gym, you know, to get his stand up better. And he brings the boxing coach with him to the fucking Pride show. So Francisco, this guy hits like a fucking Mack truck. You're a great, take him to the fucking ground, close the gap with him, don't stand up with him. And as you know what happened, he hit him.
yeah,
He hit him. He hit him with the same punch Tommy Hearns hit Roberto Duran with. It was like boom, frozen on his
yeah,
feet. Boom, face
yeah.
first. Yeah. I said, don't take that fight. And he did. He regretted it till this day. Well, we're very good friends. Matter of fact, I'm going to meet him for coffee next week. But
And
yeah, he. Pardon?
I'm a fan of Bueno because you know, I was with him, Jason Godsey, at the IBC, and the
Uh-huh.
intensity
Yeah.
the intensity he brought when he was young and full of piss and vinegar was out of this world, you know. And to be honest, to become a real martial artist, you kind of got to get past that, but it's still intimidating as hell. He beat Godsey before the fight started. Godsey, I talked to Godsey. I was good friends with him, and he said, "What am I going to do with this guy?" Before the fight, he asked me that before the fight, and I was like, "Man, you know, you got to do your thing. You're bigger, you know, whatever." But he threw Godsey through the ropes. He threw, and the IBC, man, there was blood in the ring from other fights, and you could smell the iron from the blood because the heat from the lights, and it was crazy.
And they would have a net. They would have a net on the bottom rope. If the fighter tried to squirm out of the ring, the fans would push him back in.
Yep, yep. And you could pull the net over the guy and keep him there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It was,
yeah.
yeah.
But yeah.
I'm gonna,
Hey,
I'm gonna.
Francisco's still in great shape. God damn,
Oh
he
yeah.
looks good.
No, the Francisco is a role model to me. Like he's a good guy.
Yeah,
I'll tell
he's
you
got
this.
a couple. He's got a guy who just won an MMA event, a title.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
think
and,
he's
and
a little guy, 135 pounds.
yeah, and Francisco had him with in a wrestling gym here also to be because being an MMA, you got to wrestle a little bit too. You just can't be jujitsu. Francisco had him in wrestling gyms here also.
Oh yeah.
You know, he finally won his title. His kid just won a jujitsu title.
Yeah,
His young
Francisco
kid.
is the game. He understands the game. Let me ask you about Bottarelli, and I'm going to fess up here. I think I owe Bonarelli $1,000 because because
He probably owes somebody $1,000 too.
yeah, maybe, but yeah, we had Travis Fulton, who also is deceased now and controversial. But I had Travis.
I booked Travis and Frederico's Valley Tudo that he won.
Yeah, yeah. Travis was supposed to fight Carlos Barreto in Bonarelli's show, and he no-showed me. And I think I owe him for that plane ticket.
Yeah, I brought him Felix Mitchell and Joel Sutton for that Valley Tudo show.
Yeah. And those are old school guys, Felix Lee Mitchell and Sutton. Talk about where'd they come from? Where'd they pop up? Are those guys that Art Davie referred to you?
No, I met Joel Sutton through a guy in Buffalo because Joel's from Buffalo.
Okay.
He worked at he trained at a was it a Kempo karate, I think, gym there in Buffalo. And I saw them in a nightclub one night, and the guy Didi Economos who ran the gym, American Chinese martial arts, came up to me and goes, "Can you get my guy Joel Sutton wants to be in the UFC?" And I said, if he can fight, I get him as an alternate. And he's 2-0 as an alternate in the UFC.
For sure. He's definitely one
Yeah.
of the more intriguing guys from the early days because for lack of a better word, he was efficient. For those days there was a lot of sloppiness and he was tight.
Yeah, he took his shot, boom, and
Sure.
yeah. Oh, and in
Yeah.
Buffalo, when he went to the ground with Kelda on the ground.
Kalman, yep.
Gaza had a big gash in his forehead from Joel, and Joel was digging into his fucking the hole in his head with the blood all over it. Oh my God. But they didn't need an alternate that night. Otherwise, Joel would have been the first choice for the alternate. And that's the one Marco Huas won. That was his first UFC.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Marco Ruas. Nobody was going to beat Marco Ruas that day.
Oh, he could leg kick and everything. And he liked the way I renounced him. I used to go in Japan. I go, Marco, who? And he loved that. And yeah, that the UFC, I got that approved in Buffalo too. When back then it was up to the municipalities to approve it because the state had no jurisdiction over martial arts. So my lawyer, Leroy Johnson, who was Rick James's brother, by the way, and he was on the city council. My other friend, Andy DiVincenzo, was on the city council, and I knew Mayor Masiello, and they approved the USC to come to Buffalo. And they made a deal with the promoter, Irwin Pate, to bring it to the odd. Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier in the interview, it took Peretti to fuck that up.
Yeah. He wanted to do a show. Well, the UFC got all kinds of bad publicity, of course, at that time. And he was going to do a show in Brooklyn at a small arena or something. And the politicians were like, John, do it out on Long Island or something. Don't do it in Westchester. Don't do it here right in the fucking city. Man, it's getting a lot of bad publicity. Well, you really can't stop me because I'm going by the rules. There are no rules. It was approved. There's no rules against mixed martial arts. I said, oh yeah. Well, they did late night legislation, and there's one guy who now eventually went to jail for like the one politician there for some RICO act or whatever it was. Voted it down. We're banning mixed martial art or this ultimate fighting. There's no holds barred stuff in New York State, and we were about to do the show in Niagara Falls at that night. So we had a meeting. Niagara Falls Convention Center was sold out. It was like January, February. It's fucking cold and snowy. They go, the UFC has been banned in mixed martial arts in New York State. The show is canceled. And people from all over the world, all over the country came to Niagara Falls in the dead of winter. But we have a backup plan. They always had a redneck promoter, whether it was Buddy Albin or somebody else. They had a guy in Dothan, Alabama. And they go, we could bring the UFC to Dothan, Alabama. They'll allow it here. So that day, I mean, this all happened in a matter of hours. They chartered a 757 jet and a cargo plane to come to Niagara Falls and take us to Dothan, Alabama. Uh, um, but these planes couldn't land in Dothan. They had a little air military base, but didn't have a long runway. So they flew us into Birmingham, Alabama. And then a 3-4 hour bus ride from Birmingham all the way down to Dothan, Alabama. But we had empty seats on the airplane. So the UFC said, fans were there, everything. Fuck, we came from wherever, bought tickets, airplane out. We got room for about 20 fans, 25 fans. And the first come, first serve to the airport are coming down to Dothan, Alabama with us. You had these people out in the street in front of the Niagara Falls Hilton with waving money, waving cars down late at night, trying to give them the pull. People were probably saying, who are these crazy people in the street? Take us to Niagara Falls Airport. Here, we'll give you some money. Take us to Niagara Falls Airport. So we took about 20, 25 fans with us. And I guess the cargo plane on the way down there broke down. They had to get another cargo plane, unload this stuff because, they couldn't fit everything in the octagon and everybody's bags, all that stuff in this airplane because of weight and balance, So we ended up in Dothan, Alabama. This redneck promoter had a hotel all lined up, the charter buses, about 4 or 5 of them from Birmingham, Alabama, and get down to Dothan, Alabama. We were like 4 people a piece, 5 people in a hotel room. They said, just bring your bags to the arena, get some rest, because they're going back to the airport from here. And the Waffle House next door never did that kind of business before. We packed the place. So I had Nick Sanzo on that fight. He won his first fight, and then he got beat by Jerry Bolander, I think it was. And they came around. It was Kathy Killer, Elaine McCarthy, who was the assistant at the time for the promotion. And they go, Charlie, how many people are with you? I got Nick Sanzo, me, his trainer, and this other guy from Black Belt Magazine, and from Spain. Well, we can only take 3 of you. I said, you gotta be kidding me. I said, what do you mean you can take? The plane we got back to Niagara Falls is smaller than the one we came down in.
Oh,
So
man.
they had we had a 727 coming back, a 757 going down. And I was working for the airlines at the time. So I knew. I said, oh Jesus.
Yeah.
So they had to tell the people, everybody's at the motel. We have some good news and bad news. Good news, thanks for coming down. It was a successful event. Thanks for supporting us. But
Now get home on your own.
we can't, you gotta go back in the dead of winter. You gotta get back to Niagara Falls and Dothan, Alabama. We had to leave these people there. So we get to the airport. It's a pouring rain. It's at a little military base. And so this airport doesn't have a whole big long runway. And I know a lot about airplanes. I worked for an airline for 41 years. So we packed this plane with us, packed. They did the weight and balance and everything. We're taxiing it in a runway. And I hear the pilot throttling up the plane with the brakes down. Brakes down, which is what they do, they let the brakes go. Boom. We're going down the runway. It's like 6,000. I'm watching the 1,000-foot markers out the window go by. 4,000, 3,000, 2,000. Oh, the plane rotated. We took off. There was 1,000 feet to spare. And I was like, oh. We made it back to Niagara Falls. Yeah, it was it's like, oh no. I'm watching 2,000, 3,000. Oh,
Yeah, that's incredible. Now let me ask you, that particular UFC, if I'm not mistaken, was Coleman's debut. If not, it was around there. What was your impression of Mark Coleman?
Oh, Mark Coleman was great. He was the ground and pound guy, man. He was a monster, And Maurice Smith finally found the secret, and so did Pete Smith. Too. He Maurice just learned enough to escape from being on the ground. And you could see he went out the back door, you know. He was like, "What's told Frank Shamrock? Just tell me how to get back to my feet if I'm in trouble." And that's what he did. Masterful, masterful, masterful. He was
So
a great. He was great.
what happened at some point, like you said, Art left, Peretti went on, and but you kind of never really left the sport because like you were I think you were licensed in Vegas and as a judge. As what license is it? How did you stay in MMA?
Well, I started booking guys in Shudo in Japan. I booked John Lewis wanted me to book his fights again.
Okay.
And I booked John Lewis against Ruben Asado too. And he got sick before he went to that fight. He had the flu and he had his knee was all fucked up. So when he fought Sato the second time, eventually I re-announced that show if you watch it. And Randy Couture fought Enson Inoue on those shows. Frank Shamrock fought Enson Inoue. And
Yeah.
I'm the one ring announcing those two shows. And Sakamoto would always say, "Who do you got? You got another fighter?" Yeah, I sent Din Thomas and Thomas Denny to Shudo. That's how they got on there. And I booked Din Thomas twice. And I would just bring guys to find somebody to fight anywhere. People would call me, "Oh, yeah, I need a guy who can hang. Charlie, you got a guy for an alternate show? Pay him a few $1,000s cash, sure." And but the Shudo fights were great. I booked a few guys in Shudo. They liked me a lot.
I love
And
Sakamoto because
oh no, and it was good thing about Shudo, they have their own commission. They got a commission, an actual commission.
yeah.
And you had to have a HIV test and all that stuff, and they tested for stuff, and they had their own commission. It was up and up. It wasn't backed by the Yakuza, and it was great guys. Great guys. Till this day.
Sakamoto owned a coffee store. That was his deal.
Yeah. Well, Sakamoto contacted me last year. I said, you know what? And I talked to Jeff Meyer, God rest Barry's soul, about let's do a USA versus Japan. Tough enough. And I said, Shudo's got 2 levels of amateur fighters. If I get Sakamoto, if they can get sponsors to fly a few guys over here with a couple of trainers, we'll do it. So I'm going to be working on that with Jeff Meyer. And a matter of fact, when they came up with when Tough Enough first started, there were no rules for amateur martial arts here. So Mark Ratner told me, "Chuck, you know about this stuff." He made me sort of like their amateur mixed martial arts guru for Muay Thai and all that stuff. And I went and checked it out, make sure there were doctors. I created the thing for amateur. I said, "Mark, there's no ambulance. Somebody breaks his arm or something in a Muay Thai or the parents got to take him there and they got to wait in an emergency room for hours." So that's when Mark Ratner had the commission supply EMTs for amateur martial arts and Muay Thai shows here. And it didn't cost the promoter anything because he had it arranged with the money for the EMTs for amateur martial arts here would come out of the amateur fund, which is paid for by they take $1 or something like that from every ticket from a pro event, and they put it in an amateur fund, and that's where that money came from.
That's cool. And I know Jeff and Barry Meyer real well. Barry, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but Jeff carries his memory real well. And those guys were pioneers, man. They worked with my partner Osborne on some of the early shows. And
yeah. Well, what happened?
Real deal.
Well, I met Barry and his father at UFC 3.
Right.
And we became dear friends ever since. So he wanted to do mixed martial arts in Las Vegas when he moved here. And but there are no rules. So Mark Ratner goes, "Chuck, can you brainstorm, come up with some rules?" So me, Chris Tione, the referee, and Barry, and I got some suggestions from my friend Raul Parada, who's a referee for Combate's the Mexican, right, dear friend of mine. He's coming to visit me next week or so. And he's Raul Parada. He's the one who found Crazy Horse for me for Frederico's Valley Tudo in Aruba. And I was supposed to Heath Herring. I was supposed to announce that show, but I had a little growth on my vocal cord. Thank God it was cancerous. My voice was hoarse, and I couldn't announce the show. Frederico was kind of mad. He goes, "Man, I wanted you to do this show." Anyway, so we came up with the rules for mixed martial arts, amateur. You know, no heel hooks, because you don't want some kid to get his Achilles torn for a fucking trophy. Knee bars had to be straight, not twisted. No elbows and knees to the face. And they became almost a standard. The ISKA adopted the rules just about that. We put it forth to Nevada. And Sakamoto asked me last year, he goes, "What are the rules that you use?" I said, "Well, go to the ISKA website, and it'll have the amateur rules that literally me, Barry, and Chris Tione came up with for Mark Ratner."
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And I remember Barry and Jeff came to the Abu Dhabi in Brazil. I was the lead judge for that. First time they went to, so when Eddie Bravo beat Hoyler Gracie, I was the judge at the table.
Really?
And Barry and Jeff, they attended that event as fans, and you could see the love of the sport. They just were drinking it up, and those were genuine good people. I had heard
absolutely. But I was brokenhearted when Barry wasn't with us anymore. But you know what? I think what really depressed him or broke his heart, he wanted to be a part of the UFC so bad. You know, he couldn't find a way to be a part of it. And that was just eating at him, I think. That was one of the things. He gave up his job at Jack Carl Futures, sold his condo in San Diego on the water, and put everything into, and he was going through a lot of money promoting Tough Enough MMA because he didn't have a lot of sponsors. And he's running out of his pocket, and his father was helping him out. I saw his parents at I saw his parents at Tough Enough MMA last week. I was so happy to see them.
Barry and Jeff are both true lovers of what we do, the MMA.
Oh, they're just I love them like brothers, like sons. And his father said, as long as it puts a smile on my kid's face, I don't care. I'll help them till get going.
Yeah.
And now they got all kinds of sponsors, and they started making money a couple of years ago. Jeff's got a partner that worked. They worked and they're doing well, man. I mean, problem with Barry, he used to fly people in from all over the country for an amateur show. I said, "Man, there's enough people here that can drive here from California, But he wanted to give everybody a chance, and for his love of the sport. I miss him. God, he was just such a good kid, son of a bitch.
Yeah, for sure. You meet people like that just they affect you. They affect you when you remember them. You know what I mean? And
whenever I go to the show, I just look up. I thought Barry's looking down, and I just miss that guy.
Yeah,
but it was so good to see his family.
We've talked about a few guys like that. You probably have to spend a minute every once in a while thinking about Kevin. If it wasn't for Kevin, you might not have been in this sport. I
wouldn't have known anything about it. I knew boxing because I used to work with Roberto Duran's promoter, Michael Acree and Louis DeCubas. That's how I got my start on that. I was a gopher for them. And when they had Duran on the Tuesday Night Fights on USA Network back then, and in the 90s. But yeah, I wouldn't have known anything about this stuff. Kevin brought me in the sport, and I became dear friends with Art Davey, that I am still today. And the best part. You hear this. On UFC 3, we're at the rules meeting, the drawing for the fighters. And we're there at the press conference, and they got the brackets on the wall. But they already have Ken Shamrock on one side and Royce Gracie on the other side.
Wait, let me paint the picture here. Let me paint the picture here, because UFC 3 is I'm not sure what the location was, but didn't they fly you to like New York for this press conference?
No, that was the one UFC from Buffalo, UFC 7.
Oh, okay. Because I heard a story where they actually
I'll
made
tell
a
you
big deal.
fun.
Tell us both
I'll
of
tell
them.
you.
Go.
I'll tell you a funny story about that one. But at UFC 3, we're looking. I go, Ken Shamrock's on one end and Hoist Gracie. They're wait a minute, we're supposed to draw for these. Of course, they wanted to try to create a scenario where they knew who was going to be in the final. It was like a setup. And Harold Howard gets up. He goes, I see Mr. Shamrock and Master Gracie are already up there. No disrespect to Mr. Shamrock, but you have one loss against Master Gracie. We all have none. We've never fought before, And I go, yeah, you're making a good point. And Art Davie was fuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of it, Art Davie comes up to me after the drawing. Charlie Anzalone, the manager I know the best and trust the most. How could you do this to me? I'm not happy. Fix it. Man, and as it turned out, the Cinderella ending with Steve Jennings never fought all night. And after that, I lobbied for it. I said, all right, from now on, the alternate fighter's got to take at least one beating before he goes in and fights for 50 grand. Come on,
Yeah.
And that's what they did after that. And in Buffalo, they flew us to New York City to Boomer Esiason's restaurant, Boomer's.
Okay.
And Dennis Rodman did the drawing.
Wow. Those are celebs for that time. I mean, to pay
Oh.
Boomer Esiason was the Jet quarterback.
And that's when Harold Howard lost to what's his name? He flipped him over and ground pounded him. And Kevin was a heavy favorite. He just fucked up. I mean, Harold Howard. So we're at the airport on the way home, and there was a guy who saw UFC 3 evidently, and when Steve Jennings grounded and pounded him, the guy goes up to him. He goes, "Man, I saw you in UFC 3, and you tapped out." He goes, "I never tapped out. I got punched out like a man." Yeah. We just
Yeah,
flew
no, I
down
love
there.
Howard. Yeah. Those early guys were a totally different breed, They're a totally different breed because you could tell a lot of them would have showed up to fight under a bridge. The 50,000 was nice, but a lot of them had that testosterone and stuff. And Charlie, you've been a great window to those early days because I knew they were wild. We could tell, but those were truly historic days, and you were one of those first characters that really helped push this thing forward. The Kiev stories, going to Japan, to Brazil, it's crazy.
And thanks to Kevin Rozier, God rest his soul, he's in a better place. He had so many demons on earth, and Art Davie, it's and Federico Lapenda. We all maintained our relationships, and it is what it is, Oh, and then I became I was, what was I doing? I was working an event, a Muay Thai event at the Stardust for Master Toddy. I was the event coordinator. And that's when the chief inspector at the time for the boxing commission, Tony Leto, came up to me and he goes, "Chuck Anzalone, Mark Ratner wants to know if you want to be an inspector. We got an opening." I said, "Sure." So I did that, and I did that for 16 years. And I retired from that a couple of years.
That's what I remember seeing you, because once the UFC was bought by Dana, you still did inspector work and in-ring,
Oh, yeah. I was
it's awesome.
Yeah, well, Dana didn't buy a thing. That was for Tita Brother. And you know how that came about? When I was managing John Lewis told me when I booked his fight against Sato, he goes, "People I know are going to buy the UFC, and I want to be the matchmaker." He goes, "What would you think of these matches here?" And he was writing down different matches. And at the time, he was teaching the Fertitas and Dana White Jiu-Jitsu at his JSEC Jiu-Jitsu school here in Las Vegas, which was a branch of Andre Pedernera's JSEC Jiu-Jitsu.
Sure.
And they asked John Lewis, they told him, you know, he goes, I just want to be the matchmaker. And they said, John, we need you to run the event. You know the sport and everything like that. He goes, no, I'll pass. I got other things I'm doing, starting to produce events and movies and stuff. He goes, I just want to be the matchmaker. They go, oh, we already have a matchmaker. It was Joe Silva. And they told Dana, well, Dana, we got a hotel business to run, man. You got to run this place. And that's how Dana got the job, because John Lewis turned it down.
Yeah, let me ask you this question. Why, and that's incredible to hear. What was your impression of Joe Silva? Because Joe was one of those guys that showed up at the UFC, and then he knew his stuff. And Bob Meyerowitz eventually, I think, was giving him like $500 a show as a consultant, and then he
Yeah,
became.
he goes, I'm on the internet and I know what people want to hear, what they're saying, this and that. I'll be a consultant and blah, blah, blah. I mean, Art Davey was still there at the time. I mean, he told Art Davey, they went out for steak dinner. I forgot what city they were in. And Joe Silva said, he goes, me and my wife, we've never eaten steak. I never ate steak before. They're poor, didn't have any money, And they took him to a steak dinner. Art told me that story. Oh, I laughed. I never ate steak. Well, I ate a lot of steak after that. But yeah, but nobody but Dana White could have taken the UFC to where it is. Nobody. He was the perfect face of the event. He learned the business, the fight business. He became a savvy businessman. And, what was he doing? Teaching boxing aerobics before that? It's like, and but he was the one that said, the UFC was ready to give it up. They lost so much money. And he goes, we need a TV deal, like the old Friday night fights. And at the time, that's when Spike TV took off, that did extreme sports. ESPN, everybody turned down. Art Davey, they turned down everybody. And Spike TV finally said, yeah, we'll do that show, The Ultimate Fighter, like a reality show, and then we'll have a fight afterward, event. But they had to buy on the show, and it was a $10 million buy-on. And that was the last time. TV networks don't buy fights. You got to pay for it. You got ad revenue and everything. And that was the last check the UFC was going to write. And Art Davey had talked to them. He says, if you're interested in selling, more or less, like if you're ready to say, Uncle, I got some people that might give you 40 cents on a dollar for it. But and that's when they did the reality show, and then Stefan Bonner and Forrest Griffin went toe to toe on free TV, and the rest is history.
Yeah,
And Dana was a big reason selling that deal to Spike.
and let me tell you this. There are times where you can criticize Dana, but he had everything lined up, because after Bonner and Forrest fought on that, you know what the fight the next week was? The next week on TV, Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture.
Randy Couture, and then they had Ken Shamrock fought on TV too. I think on one of those shows.
Yeah, for sure. So the thing is what do you do for an encore? He had that lined up. It was ready, and that's the thing is, like, for example, nowadays you follow MMA, you got the PFL, and they signed Ngannou. They signed Ngannou 6 months ago. What are they doing now? Where is that?
And then they made Chuck Liddell the face of the UFC by giving him guys that couldn't punch, that he could whack.
He knew he would.
Chuck was a perfect face of the UFC. But what happened is that he got knocked down in his last 5 of his last 6 fights, with one punch.
Yeah.
But you know how that they found out the secret. Well, first of all, Keith Jardine took him to the limit. I mean, Keith Jardine. I was in a dressing room. I was working Keith Jardine's corner as an inspector, and the Fertittas walked in, and they weren't real happy with Dana, and gave him a check. And here's a little bonus. He opened up the check. Whoa! It was like $40,000 or something like that. And when they started giving out bonuses, because he took it to Chuck, and he was leg kicking Chuck, punching him. Chuck would always look for one punch. Well, what Phil Nurse did from the Jackson camp, the Muay Thai trainer, he was watching tapes of Chuck Liddell. Freddie Roach once told me, I said, Freddie, what do you look for? because I used to work a lot of Pacquiao fights and stuff with Freddie. Was beautiful to work with. He goes, I look mistakes you can fix in the gym. I look for bad habits. A bad habit you can try to fix in a gym, but it's always going to be a bad habit. It's going to happen again during the fight. That's what he would look for. Fighter did the same thing. So Phil Nurse, I remember I was reading online before Rashad Evans fought, because he would look at Chuck Liddell every time he got ready to load up. He would almost sort of like bite his lower lip. He'd be going like, and that's when I said, when he does that, unload on him. And that's when Rashad Evans whacked him.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
no,
a bad habit. And he
Chuck was
kept doing it.
and Chuck was a one of a kind athlete, and you're right. They needed him, and they needed a star like that. And unfortunately, he did leave it in the ring. And you don't want to see guys take that type of beating anymore. But it's a beautiful sport that you got to see the very start for, and I'm grateful for the time with you, Charlie.
But you know what was the problem with the UFC after that? You got Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell, a lot of those great fighters, all retired at the same time.
Yeah.
Within a year or two. It's like, geez, now what? Well, let's try bringing Frank or Ken Shamrock and Tito Ortiz back, or anything. Try to find another star. They haven't really had a megastar like Chuck Liddell since.
Well,
No,
Connor.
BJ Penn. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Connor. Well, and that was the one that drove the
The
needle
only
again with pay-per-view.
and I'm with you. I'm with you. They have not had stars that were as original as the early days. Like John Jones is kind of cookie cutter, But the two for me were Ronda and Connor.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a long time after the Chuck Liddell Randy Couture era.
And it's been a
And
long time.
I mean, John Jones had all his troubles. He's a nice kid too. My friend Stonehorse trained him in his stand-up when he first started doing martial arts, mixed martial arts. Then Stonehorse Lone Goman was one of my fighters. I promoted WKA kickboxing in Buffalo. I did like 7, 8
John
events.
Jones is from
He's
Ithaca.
originally from Rochester and grew up in Ithaca, Binghamton. Yeah, and
Yeah,
they brought him to Stonehorse, who was a Mohawk Indian, an iron worker. The Mohawks used to walk the beams on the Empire State Building. His grandfather did that stuff, and he was a Muay Thai guy. And he goes, "Yeah, they brought John Jones to me." He said, "This kid's gonna be real good." And I said, "Yeah, sure, everybody's gonna be real good." Goes, after training him, I said, "This guy's the fucking real deal, this John Jones."
yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. Charlie, I'm so grateful for this time with you. I've taken up like an hour and a half of your time, and I'm gonna put this interview up as soon as I can. You
I
are a pioneer. You never fought in the cage or anything like that, but the UFC's early history was touched by you with no doubt. And
Yeah,
I'm
I was a contributor. Matter of fact, even Mark Ratner said I should be in the UFC Hall of Fame as a pioneer, the pioneer category.
yep. Yeah, he's not.
And Jason Cousins should also, because he built the first octagon.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
I'll tell you this. I will second that notion that you belong in a Hall of Fame somewhere, man, for MMA, because
I
you're
got it. I got
you're
it
everywhere.
approved in its first ever states, in the UFC's first states in Mississippi and Louisiana.
And we're talking about fights in Kiev. All of this stuff is from the 90s. This is Wild West stuff that nobody was there, and you were at ground zero everywhere. So Charlie, thank you so much for your time. I'm so grateful.
I'm so glad, and enjoy the weather in Costa Rica.
Thank you. I'll try. It's nice down here. I've been retired down here sort of since the Bodog days, and
Yeah.
having fun in my own way. And I rescue dogs now. That's my main
Oh,
passion
cool,
is dog rescue.
cool.
But
So
Charlie,
good talking to you. Thank you so
I'll have
much for recognizing me.
No, for sure. Look, you deserve it. You deserve more, but I'm going to have this podcast up on the MMA Museum and probably within the next 10 days. And we'll be able to listen to it and hear Charlie's stories in perpetuity. And that's great news for everybody.
Great.